He shoved her against the cold hood of his cruiser, twisted her arm behind her back, and actually laughed while her phone screamed with the incoming calls from the hospital. "Save it, lady," Sergeant Dale Brennan sneered, clicking the handcuffs tight around her wrists. "You're not going anywhere." He had no idea the woman dying on that operating table was the wife of the man who signed his paycheck, and he had no idea the woman he just put in cuffs was the only person on earth who could save her. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in October, and Dr. Maya Hartwell was already halfway out the door before she even finished reading the text. She had been sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea gone cold, reviewing cardiothoracic case notes on her laptop, the kind of work most people her age had long delegated to younger residents. But Maya wasn't most people. At 53, she still carried herself like a woman who had something to prove, even if she'd stopped needing to prove it to anyone but herself. 14 years in the Army, 2 combat deployments, a silver star she kept in a shoebox under her bed because she never could figure out what to do with it, and now a senior trauma surgeon at Richmond Memorial Hospital, one of the top cardiac specialists in the state of Virginia. The text from her colleague, Dr. James Okafor, was 4 words long: Elena Cross, Code Blue. Maya knew that name. Elena Cross, 51 years old, wife of Commander Harold Cross of the Richmond Police Department. She had come in 3 days earlier with what looked like a routine aortic dissection. Manageable. Serious but manageable. Maya had reviewed her chart herself. The woman was stable, or she had been. Maya grabbed her coat, her badge, her hospital-issued ID lanyard, and her keys in one fluid motion. She was in her car with the engine running before she even had time to feel afraid. She called James back immediately. "What happened?" she said, pulling out of her driveway onto the dark suburban street. "She deteriorated fast," James said, and she could hear the controlled panic in his voice. He was a good doctor, one of the best residents she'd ever trained, but good doctors still got scared. "Her BP crashed 20 minutes ago. We've got her on the table, but Maya, she's bleeding internally." The dissection extended. "We need your hands in here. Nobody else has done this procedure, not in a live situation like this. I've got the team ready, but we cannot open her chest without you." "I'm 12 minutes out," Maya said. "She may not have 12 minutes. Then she'll have to hold on," Maya said. "Keep her pressure up, whatever it takes. I'm coming." She ended the call and pressed the accelerator down. The highway was nearly empty at that hour, the long stretch of I-64 cutting through the dark Virginia countryside like a black ribbon. She was doing 85 fast, but controlled the kind of speed she had learned to drive at during her military years, when getting somewhere fast wasn't a preference but a matter of life and death. She had her hazard lights on, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward. She saw the blue lights in her rearview mirror about 4 miles outside of Richmond. For a fraction of a second, she considered not stopping. The thought crossed her mind the way a dark cloud crosses a clear sky, fast and uninvited. She knew that if she pulled over and got caught up in a routine traffic stop, Elena Cross would die on that table. She knew it with the same clinical certainty that she knew a severed aorta bleeds out in minutes, not hours. But she also knew what happened to black women who didn't stop for police in the middle of the night on empty Virginia highways. So she pulled over. She had her badge out before the cruiser even fully stopped behind her. She had her hospital ID in her other hand. She took a breath, the kind of slow, deliberate breath she used to take before entering a forward operating base, and she rolled down her window. The trooper who walked up to her car was young mid-30s, she guessed thick-necked, with the kind of expression that told you he had made up his mind about you before he ever reached your window. His nameplate read Brennan. His hand rested on his belt like he would, daring her to give him a reason. "Do you know how fast you were going?" he said. "Officer, my name is Dr. Maya Hartwell," she said, her voice even and clear. "I am a trauma surgeon at Richmond Memorial Hospital. I have a patient in critical condition who will die if I don't get there in the next 10 minutes. Here is my hospital ID and my medical license." She held both up to the window. "I am asking you respectfully and urgently to verify my credentials and let me go." Brennan looked at the ID, then he looked at her, then he looked back at the ID. the way a man looks at something he's already decided is fake. "Step out of the car," he said. "Officer." "I said step out of the car, ma'am." Her phone rang. The screen lit up the inside of the car, Richmond Memorial. It read in bright white letters. "That is my hospital calling right now," Maya said. "Please, let me answer it." "Step out of the vehicle," Brennan said again, louder this time, and his hand moved from his belt to the door handle. And Maya understood then with a cold, sinking clarity that this man was not interested in anything she had to say. She stepped out of the car. "Hands where I can see them." She raised her hands, both of them, ID and badge still in her fingers, and she stood on the cold asphalt in her coat and scrub pants, and she looked at this man, and she tried one more time. "Sergeant Brennan," she said, reading his nameplate, using his name because she had been trained that using a person's name created human connection. "A 51-year-old woman is dying on an operating table right now. I am the only surgeon at that hospital who has performed the procedure she needs. Every minute I stand here is a minute she doesn't have. Please call the hospital, call Richmond Memorial, ask for the OR desk, and they will confirm everything I'm telling you." Brennan crossed his arms. "Got a lot of people who try to talk their way out of a ticket," he said. "Never had one claim to be a doctor before. That's creative." Something moved through Maya's chest. Not anger, not yet. Something older than anger. Something she had felt before in places darker than this highway, when she had watched people look right through her like she wasn't there. "I'm not trying to get out of a ticket," she said quietly. "I don't care about the ticket. I care about the woman on that table." "Sure you do," Brennan said, and he actually smiled, a small, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Her phone rang again. "Richmond Memorial." "Can I answer that?" she asked. "You can stand right there and wait while I run your plates." He turned and walked back toward his cruiser. Maya stood on the shoulder of the highway, hands still raised slightly, watching her phone ring in her car through the still open door. The hazard lights were still blinking orange. The cold October air pressed against her face. She could feel her heartbeat in her temples, the precise, deliberate rhythm of a body that wanted to run and was being held absolutely still by will alone. She did not beg. She had never begged for anything in her life. But she counted the seconds the way she counted them in surgery, not abstractly but concretely, knowing that each one was a unit of biological time ticking away from Elena Cross's body. 43 seconds passed before Brennan came back. "License and registration," he said. "I already gave you my hospital ID. License and registration." She reached into the car slowly, deliberately, the way you moved around an unstable explosive, every motion telegraphed, nothing sudden. She handed him her driver's license and the registration from her glove box. He looked at both, looked at her. "Dr. Maya Hartwell." He read off the license. Then he looked up. "Doesn't say surgeon. Driver's licenses don't say your profession, Sergeant." "So you say." "Call the hospital," she said again. "Richmond Memorial, 804-555-0147. Ask for surgical. Ask for James Okafor. He will tell you exactly who I am and exactly why I need to be there right now. I don't take direction from a doctor," she said. The word landed between them and sat there. Brennan's jaw tightened. "From a civilian," he said slowly, "who was doing 85 miles an hour on a state highway." Her phone rang a third time. "Sergeant, please," she said, and this time the word came out stripped of everything except its most fundamental meaning. Not a performance, not a tactic, just the raw human sound of a person asking another person to listen. "Please let me answer that phone. Please call the hospital. Please do not let this woman die because of a traffic stop." Something crossed Brennan's face. She watched it happen, a flicker of something behind his eyes. The briefest hesitation, the small door where decency might have walked through. He closed it. "Turn around," he said. "Excuse me. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The world went very quiet. "You're arresting me," she said, "not a question." "Detaining you," he said, "for my safety. Now turn around." She turned around. She felt the cold metal of the handcuffs close around her wrists, and she stood there on the side of that highway, and she thought about Elena Cross. She thought about the OR team standing there with their tools in their gloved hands and their training waiting for her. She thought about James Okafor's voice. She may not have 12 minutes. She thought about what 12 minutes meant in terms of blood loss, in terms of oxygen deprivation to the brain, in terms of the irreversible cascade of system failures that began the moment a body started losing the fight. Her phone rang a fourth time. Then it stopped. "Officer Brennan," she said very quietly, "whatever you think of me, whatever you think is happening here, I want you to hear these words clearly, because I will say them exactly once. A human being is dying, and you are the reason she is dying. That is not a threat. That is a fact, and you will carry it." Brennan snorted. "Okay, Doc." He walked back to his cruiser. She heard his radio crackle, heard him call in her plates, her license. She stood on the side of the highway, and she stared at the distant glow of Richmond's skyline, and she breathed. She was calculating. That was what she did in impossible situations. She calculated. She thought about who else could perform the procedure, and her mind came back with the same answer it always did. Nobody in this building, nobody in this city had her specific training in complex type A dissection repair under crisis conditions. She had developed the modified technique herself, had published the paper on it 7 years ago, after refining it during her second deployment, when she had done it twice in a field hospital with equipment held together by improvisation and prayer. James knew the theory. He had assisted on 3 cases. But this was not the moment for a first solo. She thought about Elena Cross lying on that cold table, blood pooling where it shouldn't, her body fighting a war. It couldn't win alone. She thought about what it felt like to be that patient, to trust that someone would come, that help was on the way, that the system was working the way it was supposed to work. She thought about how many times she had been that patient's faith placed gently in her hands and how she had never once let it down. And then she heard a second set of tires on gravel. She turned her head. Headlights. A dark car pulling up behind Brennan's cruiser. Not a cruiser, a command vehicle. City plates. The door opened. She recognized the voice before she saw the face. "What in the hell is going on here?" Commander Harold Cross of the Richmond Police Department stepped out of his car into the cold highway light, and his eyes swept from Brennan's cruiser to the woman standing handcuffed on the shoulder of the road. And even from 20 feet away, she could see the exact moment that recognition hit him like a wall. He had met Maya Hartwell once 6 months ago at a hospital gala she hadn't wanted to attend. His wife had insisted on introducing them. Elena had held Maya's hand with both of hers and said, "Harold, this is the woman I told you about, the one who invented the new heart procedure." And Harold Cross had shaken her hand and said he'd heard great things. He was not shaking hands now. "Dr. Hartwell," his voice dropped half an octave. Why are you in handcuffs?" Brennan appeared from behind his cruiser, and for the first time that night, his certainty showed a crack. "Commander Cross, I pulled this woman over for speeding, and she became waiting. She's a surgeon," Cross said. "Sir," she claims, "I know what she is, Sergeant. I know exactly who she is." He turned to Maya, and his face had gone the color of ash. "My wife, is that why you were—" "Elena is on the table right now, Commander," Maya said, and she kept her voice as steady as she could because this was not the moment for emotion, not yet, not until Elena was out of surgery and breathing on her own. "James Okafor is with her. He is doing everything he can. But she needs me. She needs this procedure, and she needs it right now, and I need you to get these handcuffs off me." For 1 second, just one, Harold Cross looked like a man who might fall apart on a Virginia highway at midnight. His face did something complicated and private and human. Then the commander came back. "Brennan," he said, "take them off." "Sir, protocol requires take them off." The handcuffs came off. Maya was already moving toward Cross's car before they hit the ground. "Dribble bomb," she said. "Fast, and don't stop." Cross got behind the wheel. The engine roared. The city lights of Richmond grew larger through the windshield, and Maya sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap, feeling the blood return to her wrists, thinking about the 47 minutes that had just slipped away, forever thinking about what was waiting for her at Richmond Memorial, thinking about whether 47 minutes was too many. She had done miracles in less time than that. She had also lost people in less time than that. Her phone lit up on her lap. James Okafor. She answered it before the first ring finished. "I'm 3 minutes out," she said, a long pause on the other end. "Then Maya, you need to hurry." 11:58 p.m. Cross ran 2 red lights getting to Richmond Memorial. Neither of them cared. Maya had her eyes on the clock on the dashboard, the entire ride counting the way she had been counting since the moment Brennan's handcuffs snapped around her wrists. Every number was a calculation. Every second was a unit of something she could not get back. Cross was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had gone pale. He hadn't spoken since they pulled out of that highway shoulder, but she could feel it coming off him in waves, the fear, the fury, the desperate need to do something, and the understanding that the only thing he could do right now was drive. She was stable this morning, he said finally, and his voice was the voice of a husband, not a commander. Stripped down, raw. They told me she was stable. She was, Maya said. Aortic dissections can change fast. The wall weakens without warning. Will she? He stopped. Started again. What are her chances? Maya looked at him. She had been asked that question more times than she could count by more people in more states of terror than she could remember. She had learned a long time ago that the kindest thing she could do in that moment was not lie, but not catastrophize either. Give the truth its shape and let the person hold it. If I get there in time, she said, her chances are good. I've done this procedure 11 times. I've lost 2. I intend to keep that number where it is. Cross nodded once tightly the way a man nods when he is trying to contain himself. They pulled into the hospital's emergency bay at 11:59 p.m. Maya was out of the car before it fully stopped. She heard Cross behind her, heard him say something into his radio. She didn't catch the words. She was already through the sliding doors, already scanning the corridor for a familiar face. James Okafor appeared at the end of the hallway at a near run, and the look on his face told her everything she needed to know before he said a word. She's still on the table, he said. BP is 60/30. We've got her on pressors, but she's not responding the way we need her to. Who's in there? Torres and Kim. Anesthesia is Dr. Park. He's been holding her steady, but Maya, the dissection extended to the descending arch. It's worse than the imaging showed. Maya was already moving, already pulling on gloves that a nurse appeared from nowhere to hand her, already thinking 3 steps ahead of where her hands would need to be. Get me into that room, she said. Or 3, James said, falling into step beside her. But there's something else. She didn't slow down. Tell me. Brennan called ahead before Cross showed up on the highway. He radioed ahead to the hospital and told security that a woman claiming to be a surgeon might try to access the building and that she should be held for questioning. Maya stopped walking. She turned to look at James, and for a moment the hallway, the noise, the smell of antiseptic and urgency all fell away. He called the hospital, she said. Security stopped me in the corridor about 40 minutes ago asking if there was a surgeon named Hartwell on staff. I told them you were the attending of record on Elena Cross. They backed off, but he tried to stop me from getting into my own hospital, she said. Not a question. A statement, spoken quietly with a particular quality of a person who is filing something away, not for later, for always. Maya, James said carefully, we can deal with that. Right now we need to... I know, she said, and she started walking again. She pushed through the doors of OR3 at 12:02 a.m. The room was exactly what she needed it to be. Controlled. Focused, the team working in their practiced rhythm. Dr. Park at the head of the table calling out numbers in his steady, uninflected voice. Torres looked up when she came in. Kim didn't, because Kim's eyes never left the surgical field, and that was exactly why Maya had helped recruit her. Talk to me, Maya said, stepping up to the table. Torres gave her the rundown in 60 seconds. Maya listened with her eyes on Elena Cross's face, calm, distant. The particular stillness of a body under anesthesia, fighting something it didn't understand. She had seen that face 10,000 times. She had learned to read it the way other people read weather. Okay, Maya said. I need a different approach angle. We're going in modified, same as the Okafor paper. James, you're my second pair of hands. Torres, I need you on suction. Kim, stay exactly where you are. BP is dropping, Dr. Park said. I see it. She looked at the monitors. How much time did we lose tonight? Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. All right, she said softly. Let's bring her home. She worked for the next 40 minutes in absolute silence, except for the necessary words, instrument, names, pressure, readings, requests for adjustment. This was the place where Maya had always felt most herself, not the army, not the award ceremony, not the conference podiums or the published papers. Here, hands in mine locked every variable accounted for. This was where the noise of the world stopped, and there was only the work, and the work was everything. At 12:44 a.m., Elena Cross's blood pressure stabilized. At 12:51 a.m., Dr. Park said, "She's holding." At 1:03 a.m., Maya stepped back from the table, stripped off her outer gloves, and said, "Close her up. She's going to be fine." James exhaled so hard it almost sounded like a laugh. Torres clapped once softly. Kim allowed herself a single nod. Maya walked out of OR3 and found Commander Cross standing in the corridor exactly where she had left him, still in his coat, still with his radio in his hand, looking like a man who had been holding his breath for an hour. "She's stable," Maya said. Cross's entire body changed. It was like watching something that had been clenched for hours slowly come undone. His head dropped for a moment, and when he raised it again, his eyes were bright. "Thank you," he said. It came out barely above a whisper. "She'll be in recovery for a few hours. You can see her after 2 a.m. Maya paused. Then she said, "Commander, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as a law enforcement official, not as a husband." His expression shifted. The gratitude was still there, but something harder came up behind it. "Go ahead." "Sergeant Brennan didn't just pull me over. He detained me without cause after I identified myself and provided credentials. He refused to call the hospital to verify my story. He ignored 4 incoming calls from this facility. He put me in handcuffs. And then, she let this land, he called ahead to this hospital and told security to stop me from entering the building. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. He did what Cross said. He attempted to prevent me from accessing my own patient," Maya said, "while she was actively dying on my operating table. He knew I was claiming to be a surgeon responding to an emergency, and he still made that call." Cross's jaw tightened. He looked at something over her shoulder, and she could see him processing it. The husband and the commander fighting each other for control of the same face. "I'm going to need your official statement," he said finally. "You'll have it," she said. She turned and walked back down the hallway, and she felt the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb. And with it came the thing she had been holding back all night. Not fear, not anger, but something heavier than both. Grief. Grief almost. The grief of knowing that she had been doing everything right, had been exactly who she was supposed to be, and that none of it had mattered to Dale Brennan. That her badge and her credentials and her 14 years of service and her published papers and her silver star in a shoebox had all been irrelevant the moment he looked at her through that car window and made his decision. She found an empty chair in the staff corridor and sat down and put her face in her hands for exactly 30 seconds. Then she straightened up and called her lawyer, 2:17 a.m. The hospital was quieter now. The overnight shift had settled into its rhythm. Maya was at the nurse's station on the cardiac floor finishing her notes on Elena Cross's case when she heard the commotion near the elevator bank. She looked up. 2 men in plain clothes, one she recognized as Detective Samuels from the city precinct, one she didn't know, were talking to James Okafor in the kind of hushed, pointed way that meant the conversation wasn't friendly. She walked over. "Is there a problem?" she said. Samuels looked at her. He was a compact man, mid-40s, with the permanently tired expression of someone who had worked nights for too long. "Dr. Hartwell, we were hoping to speak with you." "At 2 in the morning. It's been a busy night," he said. "It has," she agreed. "What can I do for you?" "We've received a complaint," he said carefully, "from Sergeant Brennan regarding the incident on the highway tonight. He alleges that you were uncooperative and physically aggressive during the traffic stop." The word came out before she could stop it, a single quiet laugh. "Not cruel, just honest." "He alleges that I was physically aggressive," she said. "Those are his words, Dr. Hartwell. I was handcuffed, detective. How physically aggressive is a handcuffed woman in scrubs on the side of a highway?" James made a sound beside her that was not quite a cough. "I understand," Samuel said, and she believed him. There was something in his face that wasn't hostile, something careful, almost sympathetic. "But I still need to document the encounter from your perspective." "My lawyer's name is Patricia Webb," Maya said. "She's expecting your call. You'll have my formal statement within 24 hours. She paused. "Is there anything else?" Samuels held her gaze for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. For what it's worth, Dr. Hartwell, the call he made to this hospital is going to be a problem for him. Radio dispatch logs everything. She looked at him. He looked back, and his expression said the rest of what his words couldn't. "Thank you, detective," she said. He nodded once and walked away. James turned to her the instant they were alone. "Did he just—" "Yes," she said. "So there's a record." "There's always a record," she said. "The question is whether anyone looks at it." 3:04 a.m. Maya was in Elena Cross's recovery room when Elena opened her eyes for the first time. It happened slowly, the way waking from anesthesia always happened. The consciousness climbing back up through layers of darkness and chemical fog, the eyes fluttering before they could focus. Maya was sitting in the chair by the bed, not because protocol required it, but because she wanted to be there. She had saved this woman. She intended to see her wake up. Elena's eyes found her face. "You're here," Elena said. Her voice was barely a sound, rough and soft at once. "I'm here," Maya said. "Harold? He's just outside. He's been here all night." Maya leaned slightly forward. "Elena, I need you to rest. You came through the surgery beautifully. But your body has been through a great deal, and—" "Did something happen?" Elena said. Her eyes were clearer now, sharpening the way patients' eyes did when some animal part of them sensed that the story wasn't simple. "You have a look." Maya was quiet for a moment. "There will be time to talk about that," she said carefully. "Maya." Elena's hand moved weakly but deliberately toward the edge of the bed, toward Maya's arm. "I can see it on your face. What happened tonight?" The question sat in the air between them. Maya had been a surgeon for 22 years. She had delivered bad news and good news and complicated news and news that had no clean category. She knew how to manage information, how to control a conversation, how to decide what to say and when. But Elena Cross was looking at her with the eyes of a woman who had just come back from somewhere very dark and very quiet, and who understood with the particular clarity of the almost dead that she was owed the truth. "I was delayed getting here tonight," Maya said. "Delayed how? A traffic stop on the highway." Elena was silent for a moment. "Then how long?" "Long enough that it mattered." Another silence. Elena's hand rested still on the bed. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but very steady. "Who stopped you?" Maya met her eyes. "A state trooper named Brennan." Something moved across Elena Cross's face. Something complicated, something that went deeper than the pain of surgery and the fog of anesthesia. It was the look of a woman who understood exactly what had happened on that highway without needing to be told another word. "He didn't believe you," Elena said. "No," Maya said. "He did not." Elena closed her eyes. She was quiet for so long that Maya thought she had drifted back to sleep. Then she opened them again and looked at the ceiling and said very softly, "My husband is going to want to handle this quietly." "I know," Maya said. "He's going to say it's a personnel matter. He's going to say the department will handle it internally." "I know that too." Elena turned her head and looked at Maya directly. "Are you going to let him—" The question had an edge to it, not accusatory, not aggressive, just honest. The kind of question one woman asks another when they are both standing on the same side of something that has cost them both more than it should have. Maya looked back at her for a long moment. "No," she said, "I'm not." Elena Cross held her gaze, and then slowly through the exhaustion and the pain and the chemical haze of recovery, she did something Maya didn't expect. She smiled. "Good," she said. 9:14 a.m. Wednesday. Maya hadn't slept. She had gone home at 4:30 in the morning, stood in her shower for 10 minutes, changed her clothes, and driven back to the hospital by 6. Sleep felt like something that belonged to a different version of her life, the version that existed before last night, before the highway, before the cold weight of handcuffs on her wrists. That version felt very far away now. She was at her desk in the attending lounge when Patricia Webb called. Patricia was 58 years old, a civil rights attorney out of Washington, who had been Maya's personal lawyer for 11 years, ever since Maya had needed someone to navigate the Army's medical discharge process after her second deployment. She was precise, relentless, and constitutionally incapable of sugarcoating anything. Maya had always loved that about her. "I've already pulled the radio dispatch logs," Patricia said without preamble. "Brennan's call to the hospital is documented. Time stamped at 11:52 p.m., 7 minutes after he initiated the traffic stop. The recording captures him telling the security desk, and I'm quoting here, that a woman, quote, may attempt to gain unauthorized access to the facility using fraudulent medical credentials. That is his exact language. Maya closed her eyes briefly. He said fraudulent. He did, while you were standing on that highway with your hospital badge in your hand. Patricia's voice was measured, but Maya had known her long enough to hear what lived underneath the measured tone. Maya, this isn't just a bad traffic stop. What Brennan did the moment he made that call crossed from misconduct into active interference with emergency medical care, potentially criminal interference. Can we prove intent? We don't need intent for the civil claim. But for the federal angle, yes, intent matters. And the fact that he called ahead, rather than simply detaining you and moving on, suggests he wanted to make sure you didn't get through. She paused. There's also something else. Maya waited. I ran Brennan's record this morning. He's had 3 prior complaints filed against him in the last 4 years. 2 were dismissed without investigation. 1 resulted in a written reprimand that was expunged from his file 18 months later. All 3 complaints were filed by Black women. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something that had no clean name, but that Maya recognized in her bones, in the particular way you recognize something you have always known but have never been able to prove. Who expunged the reprimand? Maya asked. That, Patricia said, is a very good question, and I intend to find out at 10:30 a.m. The hospital administrator's name was Gerald Hatch, and he had called Maya into his office with the energy of a man who was hoping this problem would be manageable if handled quickly enough. He was wrong. She sat across from his desk in the chair he offered her, and she watched him arrange his expression into something that was supposed to read as concerned authority, but came out closer to anxious bureaucracy. Maya, he said, using her first name in the way that people use first names when they wanted to create intimacy that wasn't there. I want you to know that the hospital takes the events of last night extremely seriously. Do you? She said. Of course. And I want to personally apologize for the confusion at the security desk. The officer on duty was simply following the call that came in. He had no way of knowing. Gerald, she said, and something in her tone made him stop. A Virginia state trooper called this hospital and told your security desk to prevent me from entering the building, while my patient was on an operating table. What is the hospital's position on that? Hatch shifted in his chair. We're looking into the circumstances. I don't need you to look into them. I was there. I'm telling you what happened. She leaned forward slightly. What I need to know is whether Richmond Memorial Hospital intends to stand behind its attending surgeon, or whether you intend to manage this quietly and hope it goes away. The silence stretched. We fully support you, Maya, he said, but the words came out 1 beat too slow, and they both heard it. I'd like that in writing, she said, by end of business today. My attorney's contact information is at the nurse's station. She stood up and walked out of his office, and she could feel his discomfort following her down the hallway. Way like a shadow, and she didn't care even a little. 11:45 a.m. The first reporter called James Okafor's cell phone. He found Maya in the break room and held the phone out to her like it was something that might bite. Channel 7, he said. They're saying something about a video. What video? Apparently someone on that highway last night had a dash cam. Maya took the phone. She didn't answer the reporter. Instead, she called Patricia. There's a dash cam video, she said. I know, Patricia said. It was posted on social media 40 minutes ago. It's already at 200,000 views. The air went out of the room. Maya sat down in the nearest chair. What does it show? Everything, Patricia said quietly. Your interaction with Brennan from the moment you stepped out of the car. The phone ringing, the handcuffs, all of it. She paused. Maya, I have to be honest with you. This is about to become very big, very fast. Bigger than a civil complaint, bigger than an internal investigation. Are you ready for that? Maya thought about Elena Cross saying, are you going to let him handle it quietly? And her own answer coming back without hesitation. Yes, she said. Then we need to get ahead of it. I want you to give a statement today. Not to Channel 7, not yet, but we need your narrative in public before Brennan's department gets a chance to shape it. Set it up, Maya said, 20 p.m. She was back at Elena's bedside when Commander Cross walked in. He had been there that morning briefly before Maya arrived. She had read the note in the chart from the night nurse. He had sat with his wife for 2 hours the nurse had written and hadn't left until she fell asleep again. Now he was back, and he had the look of a man who had been managing two entirely different crises simultaneously and was not finding either one easy. Elena was more alert now, props slightly color returning the machines around her, doing their work steadily and well. She looked at her husband when he walked in, and then she looked at Maya, and the three of them occupied the room in a configuration that was complicated in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. "Harold," Elena said, "how are you feeling?" he asked, and Maya heard the way he redirected the husband's instinct to put her comfort first, the commander's instinct to delay the harder conversation. "I feel like I had heart surgery," Elena said, "and like I want to know what you're going to do about what happened to Maya." Cross looked at Maya. Maya said nothing. "There's going to be an internal review," he started. "Harold." Elena's voice was soft, but it had a spine in it. "I have been married to you for 24 years. I know what internal review means. It means Brennan gets a reprimand and a transfer, and in 18 months nobody remembers." Cross's expression was unreadable, but his hands, Maya noticed, were very still at his sides, the stillness of a man holding himself together by conscious effort. "Elena, there are procedures. There are also cameras," Elena said. "And from what the nurses are telling me, there are 200,000 people who have already watched what happened to this woman on that highway." She paused. "She saved my life, Harold, with 47 fewer minutes than she should have had. What are you going to do?" The question sat in the room like a third person. Cross turned to Maya, and this time his face wasn't the face of a grateful husband or a cautious commander. It was something more uncomfortable than either. It was the face of a man confronting the gap between what he knew was right and what was easy. "The video," he said, "it changes the public dimension of this." "It doesn't change what happened," Maya said. "It just makes it harder to pretend it didn't." Another silence. "I want to formally request your statement," Cross said finally, "as part of an official inquiry, not internal review, a formal departmental inquiry with independent oversight." It was more than she had expected from him in this room at this moment. She held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, taking the measure of it, deciding whether it was real. "You'll have it," she said, 3 p.m. By 3 o'clock, the video had 4 million views. Maya found this out from James, who had been monitoring his phone with the frequency of a man watching something, either wonderful or terrible, unfold, possibly both. He found her outside the pharmacy on the second floor and fell into step beside her with the energy of someone who needed to talk. 4 million, he said. "I heard. Maya, they're saying your name on CNN." She stopped walking, turned to look at him. "CNN," she said. "The Chiron reads Virginia surgeon handcuffed during emergency call." He hesitated. "There's also a statement from the Virginia State Police. They're saying the stop was conducted according to protocol and that Sergeant Brennan acted within his authority." Something hardened in her chest. Not surprised she had expected this, but hearing it still did something. "Within his authority," she repeated. "That's what they said. He called my hospital and told them I was using fraudulent credentials, James, while I was standing on the side of that road with my badge in my hand." "I know. And they're saying protocol." "I know," James said again more quietly. She started walking again faster now. "Where's Patricia?" "Lobby. She's been on the phone for the last 2 hours." Patricia met her at the elevator with her coat on and her briefcase in her hand, and the expression of a woman who had moved past preparation and into momentum. "Virginia State Police issued their statement 11 minutes ago," Patricia said. "It's a mistake. They've just made this significantly harder for themselves." She held up her phone. On the screen was a document Maya recognized as a legal filing. "I'm submitting the complaint to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division this afternoon. Federal level, Maya, not state, not city, federal. Because what Brennan did on that highway and what he did when he called this hospital constitute a pattern, and the VSP's statement this afternoon confirms they intend to protect that pattern." Maya read the first paragraph of the filing. Then she looked up. "The 3 prior complaints," she said. "All included," Patricia said, "the expunged reprimand, the pattern of targeting the call to the hospital. It's in there." She paused. "There's one more thing. Two of the three women who filed prior complaints against Brennan have already called my office today. After they saw the video, Maya stood very still. They want to add their testimony, Patricia said. The elevator opened. Neither of them moved for a moment. He's done this before, Maya said, not a question. Differently, Patricia said carefully, but the same, yes. Maya thought about those women, whoever they were, whatever roads they had been standing on when Dale Brennan had decided they didn't deserve to be believed. She thought about how many of them had filed reports that were dismissed, had written statements that were expunged, had quietly absorbed something that should never have been quiet. She thought about what it meant that it had taken a dash cam and 4 million views for anyone to look. Tell them yes, Maya said. Tell them absolutely yes. 4:47 p.m. The press conference was Maya's idea, but Patricia shaped it. They held it on the hospital steps, not for drama, but for context. This was where the story ended. This was the building Elena Cross was alive inside of. The geography mattered. Maya stood at the microphones in her white coat. She had put it on deliberately, consciously, the same way she had held her badge up on that highway. She was not performing. She was simply refusing to be invisible. She spoke for 4 minutes. She told the truth in the order it happened, without editorializing, without anger in her voice, because she had learned a long time ago that anger gave people permission to focus on the anger instead of the facts. She stated what Brennan had done. She stated what it had cost. She stated what she intended to do about it. Then she said one thing that wasn't in Patricia's prepared remarks. She looked directly at the cameras and she said, I want to speak to every healthcare worker watching this who has been stopped, questioned, dismissed, or delayed because someone decided they didn't belong in the space they had earned. I want you to know that what happened to me was not unusual. That is the problem. And unusual or not, it ends here. She stepped back from the microphone. The questions came fast, reporters calling her name, shouting over each other, cameras clicking in a continuous mechanical roar. Patricia stepped forward to manage them, and Maya stepped back, and in that moment of stepping back, she felt something she hadn't felt since she walked out of that OR at 1 a.m. Not relief exactly, not triumph, steadiness. The specific grounded feeling of a person who has stopped being buffeted and started moving in a direction she chose. Her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. It was a text from Elena Cross, 3 words. I'm watching. Good. Maya put the phone in her coat pocket and looked out at the crowd of reporters and cameras in the city of Richmond spreading out behind them in the afternoon light. And she breathed and she thought about what came next, because Brennan's department had just called what happened on that highway a matter of protocol. And Patricia had just filed with the Department of Justice. And 2 women Maya had never met were waiting to tell their stories. And Elena Cross was alive. And none of this, not one single piece of it, was over by 12 p.m. Wednesday. The press conference had barely ended when the Virginia State Police issued a second statement. Maya was still on the hospital steps, still fielding questions through Patricia, when James pushed through the crowd and held his phone in front of her face. She read the statement once, then again, because the first time she thought she had misread it. She hadn't. The statement said that Dr. Maya Hartwell had been stopped for a documented traffic violation and that Sergeant Dale Brennan had followed all proper procedures during the encounter. It said that the dashcam footage circulating on social media represented only a partial view of events, and that context was missing. And then in the final paragraph, it said that Dr. Hartwell's claims of emergency were unverifiable at the time of the stop, as she had not provided adequate documentation to confirm her identity as a licensed medical professional. Patricia read it over Maya's shoulder and made a sound that was not quite a word. Adequate documentation, Maya said. I handed him my hospital badge and my medical license. I know, Patricia said. He looked at them. He looked directly at them. Maya, Patricia put a hand on her arm briefly firmly. They just called you a liar on official letterhead. That is the worst legal decision they could have made, because we have the badge, we have the license, we have the dispatch log, and we have 4 million people who watched the video. She took the phone back. Let them dig. Every statement they issue makes the federal case stronger. But Maya wasn't thinking about the federal case in that moment. She was thinking about every person who would read that statement and believe it. Every person who would look at the official seal of the Virginia State Police and think, well, there must be 2 sides. Every person who would decide that a black woman claiming she was a doctor on a highway in the middle of the night sounded like something that needed to be doubted. She knew exactly how many people that was. Set up the interview, she said to Patricia. Not a press conference. A sit-down. Tonight if possible. Which outlet? Whoever gets us the biggest room, Maya said. 7:30 p.m. The interview aired live on Channel 4 at 7:30, and by 8 o'clock the Virginia State Police's second statement had become the most mocked document on the internet. Maya hadn't watched herself on television in years. She sat in the green room afterward with a cup of coffee she didn't drink and listened to Patricia's running commentary through the phone and thought about the women who had called the office that afternoon. The ones who had filed complaints against Brennan. The ones whose reports had been dismissed and expunged and quietly buried. Patricia had told her their names earlier. Denise Calloway, 44, a registered nurse from Henrico County, who had been detained by Brennan for 20 minutes during a routine commute and told she fit the description of a theft suspect. No suspect had been identified. No charges had been filed. Her complaint had been dismissed in the 6 days, and Yvonne Marshall, 57, a high school principal from Chesterfield, who had been pulled over twice in 4 months by the same trooper both times without receiving a citation, both times left shaken enough that she had driven to the precinct the next morning to file a report. Her report had been placed in a file that was subsequently listed as inactive. 3 women, 3 different circumstances. The same trooper, the same outcome. Maya thought about what Patricia had said. He's done this before. Differently, but the same. She set down the coffee cup and called Patricia back. I want to meet them, she said. Denise and Yvonne, I want to sit down with them before we go any further. Maya, from a legal standpoint, it might be better to keep the cases separate so that I don't care about the legal standpoint right now, she said. I care about those 2 women. Can you set it up? A pause. Tomorrow morning, Patricia said. My office? 8 a.m., 9:45 p.m. Cross called her while she was driving home. She almost didn't answer. She was tired in a way that went past the body and into something deeper, the kind of tired that came not from lack of sleep, but from spending 24 hours fighting a battle that should never have needed to be fought. But she saw his name on the screen, and she answered because Elena was still in that hospital. And because Harold Cross was a complicated man she hadn't yet finished taking the measure of. I watched the interview, he said, and on a long pause. The department's statement this afternoon was not run past me before it was issued. Maya let that sit for a moment. Who issued it? Deputy Superintendent Gareth Foley, Cross said. He oversees the VSP liaison office. He and Brennan came up together, same academy class. There it was. So it's not just Brennan, Maya said. It never is, Cross said. And the way he said it quietly with something that sounded like old exhaustion told her that he had known this for a long time and had been living alongside it in the uncomfortable way that people lived alongside things they couldn't fix alone. Harold, she said, using his first name deliberately because this was not a conversation for titles. I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me directly. Go ahead. The reprimand that was expunged from Brennan's record 18 months ago. Patricia found it. Do you know who authorized the expungement? Silence. Harold. Foley, he said. One word. Flat and final. Maya stared at the road ahead of her. And you knew. I knew it had been expunged. I didn't know the full history of the complaints until this morning. He paused. That is not an excuse. I should have looked harder. Yes, she said. You should have. Another silence, longer this time. She let it be long. I'm going to testify, Cross said. If it comes to a federal hearing, I'm going to put everything I know on record. She hadn't expected that either. 2 unexpected things from Harold Cross in 2 days. She filed that away and thought about what it meant. Elena will be glad to hear that, she said. It has nothing to do with Elena, he said carefully. It has to do with what's right. She believed him. She wasn't sure she fully trusted him yet, but she believed him in that moment. Get some rest, Commander, she said and ended the call. Thursday, 8 a.m. Patricia's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Richmond, and it had the quiet, purposeful energy of a place where serious things got decided. Maya arrived at 7:55 and found Denise Calloway already there, sitting in the waiting area with her hands folded in her lap, wearing the composed expression of a woman who had rehearsed what she was about to say many times in the privacy of her own home. She was smaller than Maya had pictured, soft-spoken with careful eyes and the particular posture of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible in rooms where she wasn't sure she was welcome. She stood up when Maya walked in. "Dr. Hartwell," she said. "Denise," Maya said and shook her hand. "Thank you for coming." "I've been waiting 2 years for someone to listen," Denise said simply. Yvonne Marshall arrived 3 minutes later. She was taller, broader-shouldered, with the air of someone accustomed to running a building full of other people's problems. She looked at Maya when she walked in and said, "I saw the video. I recognized him before they put his name on the screen." The three of them sat down together in Patricia's conference room, and for the next 90 minutes they talked. What Maya heard in that room settled into her chest like stones. Not because the stories were dramatic, they weren't not in the way that made headlines. They were ordinary in the most painful sense of the word. Denise pulled over on her way to a 12-hour nursing shift, hands shaking so badly by the time Brennan let her go that she had to sit in a parking lot for 20 minutes before she could drive. Yvonne's second stop, the one that finally pushed her to file Brennan, leaning in her window and saying with a smile, "You match a description we've been tracking in this area," and Yvonne knowing with every cell in her body that there was no description, that she matched one description and one description only, and that description was written in the language of her skin. Both of them had filed reports. Both of them had been told in different language but identical meaning that nothing was there. That protocol had been followed, that they should move on. Patricia had a legal pad in front of her and was writing steadily. Maya sat across from Denise and Yvonne and felt something move through her that wasn't anger anymore. It was older than anger, steadier than anger, the kind of feeling that didn't burn out. "I want you both to know something," Maya said when the stories had been told and the room had gone quiet. "What you did when you filed those reports, that took courage. The system failed you. That is the truth, and it is documented, and it will be part of this case." She looked at them directly, one and then the other. "You are not footnotes. You are the center of this." Denise looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked up, and her eyes were bright. "They made me feel like I was crazy," she said. "For 2 years, I wondered if I had misread it, if I had been too sensitive, if I'd imagined the way he looked at me." She stopped. "And then I saw that video, and I watched him put handcuffs on you, and I thought I didn't imagine anything." "You didn't," Maya said. "None of us did," Yvonne said quietly. By 10:30 a.m., the Department of Justice acknowledged receipt of Patricia's complaint at 10:27 a.m. Patricia forwarded the confirmation to Maya's phone with a single line, "It's official. Federal clock is running." Maya was in the hospital by then, checking on Elena, when Gerald Hatch appeared in the corridor, looking like a man who had received news he didn't know what to do with. "Maya," he said, "I want to update you on the hospital's position." "Has it changed since yesterday?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "We've consulted with legal counsel overnight," he said, "and the board has authorized me to tell you that Richmond Memorial will be filing a formal complaint with the Virginia State Police regarding the interference with patient care, in writing as you requested." She had not expected it this quickly. She kept that off her face. "Thank you, Gerald," she said. "The board also wants you to know." He hesitated in the way of a man delivering a message he hasn't fully digested. "That you have the hospital's complete and public support." She looked at him for a moment. Yesterday he had said the same words and they had come out hollow. Today they sounded different, not because Gerald Hatch had suddenly become a different person, but because 4 million views in a DOJ filing had rearranged the landscape of what was convenient. She understood that. She accepted it for what it was. "I appreciate it," she said, and she meant it in the limited way that it was meant. 12:15 p.m. Brennan's union rep issued a statement at noon. James found Maya in the cafeteria and read it to her from his phone while she ate a sandwich she barely tasted. The statement said that Sergeant Brennan was a dedicated officer with an exemplary record who had been subjected to a campaign of public harassment and misinformation. It said that the dashcam video had been deceptively edited and removed from context. It said that Sergeant Brennan feared for his safety during the traffic stop and had acted to protect himself. Maya put down the sandwich. "He feared for his safety," she said. "That's what it says. I was in scrubs, James. I had my hands up. My badge was visible. I know. He was afraid of me." James looked at her carefully. He was 34 years old. Nigerian-American, had grown up in Atlanta and had spent his entire medical career watching the way the world decided who looked like a threat and who didn't. He didn't say anything for a moment. He didn't need to. "The union rep is a problem," he said finally. "No," Maya said. "The union rep is a distraction. The DOJ filing is the story. The 3 complaints are the story. The expunged record and Foley's name on it, that is the story." She picked the sandwich back up. "Brennan's union can say whatever it wants. Evidence doesn't care about statements." Her phone rang. "Patricia." "The DOJ wants a preliminary call," Patricia said. "This afternoon at 3. They want to understand the scope of the pattern before they assign investigators." "I'll be there," Maya said. "There's something else. A journalist at the Washington Post has been working on a piece about misconduct patterns in Virginia State Police for 7 months, independently of our case. She reached out this morning because the video put a name and a face to something she had been tracking in data. She has records of 43 complaints against VSP troopers in the last 5 years that were dismissed within 10 days of filing. Brennan is in there 3 times. Maya set down the sandwich again. 43, she said. 43 documented. She believes the actual number is higher. Patricia paused. "She wants to talk to you." "Set it up," Maya said, after the DOJ call. 3 p.m. The call with the Department of Justice lasted 45 minutes. Maya spoke for the first 20, walking the investigator through everything in order: the timeline, the handcuffs, the call to the hospital, the prior complaints, Foley's name, Cross's testimony, offer the VSP's public statements. She spoke the way she presented cases in grand rounds, precisely, completely without filler. The investigator asked good questions. Maya answered them all. At the end of the call, the investigator said, "Dr. Hartwell, now I want to be clear about something. And what you're describing, the pattern of complaints, the systematic dismissals, the involvement of a senior official in suppressing disciplinary records, this goes well beyond a single traffic stop." "I know," Maya said. "This is going to be a significant investigation. It's going to take time, and it's going to require you to stay in this for the long run." "I've been in harder things for longer," Maya said. A brief pause on the other end. Then, "I believe you." 5:20 p.m. She went back to Elena's room at the end of the afternoon because that was where the day had begun, in a sense on a dark highway, racing toward this room, toward this woman, and something in Maya needed to close that circle before she could face what came next. Elena was sitting up now. Real color in her face, real alertness in her eyes. She looked like herself, whatever that meant, after everything her body had been through. She was holding a cup of tea and watching the door when Maya came in, as though she had been waiting. "You look tired," Elena said. "I am," Maya said, and she sat down without being asked. "Tell me what happened today." So Maya told her. She told her about Denise and Yvonne. She told her about the DOJ call. She told her about Foley's name and the 43 complaints and the journalist at the Post. She told her all of it methodically, the way she had been trained to brief, and Elena listened without interrupting, her tea going cold in her hands. When Maya finished, Elena was quiet for a long moment. "When Harold and I got married," she said finally, "his mother told me something. She said you were going to spend your whole life watching that man protect a system that wasn't built to protect you. She said love him anyway, but never confuse him with the system." She looked at Maya. "I thought about that a lot today." Maya looked at her. "Is he the system?" "No," Elena said carefully, "but he lives inside it. And there's a difference between a man who does the right thing when his wife almost dies and a man who does the right thing when the cameras are off and nobody's watching." She set the tea down. "I don't know yet which one he is." Maya held her gaze. "Neither do I." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we watch," she said. Maya's phone buzzed on the chair beside him. She looked at the screen. Patricia again. A text. "This time Brennan has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. VSP just confirmed." She turned the phone so Elena could see it. Elena read it, said nothing for a moment. Then she looked up, and in her eyes there was something complicated. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but something quieter and more durable. The look of a woman who understood that administrative leave was a door, not a destination. That the distance between a door and justice was still very, very long. It's a start, Elena said. It's a start, Maya agreed. And outside the hospital window, the city of Richmond moved through its Thursday evening in its ordinary way. And somewhere in a downtown office, Patricia Webb was making phone calls that would be felt for years. And somewhere in a parking lot, a state trooper was sitting with a new understanding of the weight of a single decision made on a dark highway. And Maya Hartwell sat beside the woman she had saved and let herself feel for just a moment what it was to be exactly where she was supposed to be. Friday, 7:45 a.m. Administrative leave was not the same thing as accountability, and everyone in Richmond knew it. By Friday morning, the story had traveled so far beyond Virginia that Maya's name was appearing in newspapers she had never read, in cities she had never visited. Patricia called at 7:45 while Maya was still in her car in the hospital parking garage, engine off, phone in hand, reading a text from a colleague in Seattle who had seen the interview on Channel 4 and had written simply, "We see you. We're with you." She had received 112 messages like that in the last 18 hours. From nurses, from surgeons, from EMTs and paramedics and emergency dispatchers, from people she had trained with, served with, studied with, from strangers. The messages kept coming, and each one landed differently than the last because after a while they stopped feeling like support and started feeling like something else, like the sound of a much larger silence finally breaking open. "The Post piece runs tomorrow morning," Patricia said. "The journalist, her name is Rachel Huang, she sent me the draft last night. Maya, she has 43 cases documented with names, dates, and dispatch records. 6 of them are VSP troopers from the same district as Brennan. The piece connects Foley directly to at least 4 of the dismissals through his departmental signature." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Foley signed off on 4 dismissals himself. His name is on the paperwork. He would have had to know what he was signing." "That's not misconduct," Maya said. "That's a system." "That is exactly what Rachel's piece argues," Patricia said. "And it's exactly what the DOJ investigator said she needed: documented pattern, documented authority, documented suppression. When this runs tomorrow, the federal investigation stops being about one trooper on one highway and becomes something much larger." Maya sat with that for a moment. She thought about the 43 complaints. She thought about Denise in Patricia's conference room, saying, "I wondered for 2 years if I had imagined it." She thought about Yvonne's face when she described Brennan leaning into her window with that smile. She thought about the 40 people she didn't yet know whose names were in Rachel Huang's files. "Is she protected?" Maya asked. "The journalist." Patricia paused. "Well, what do you mean?" "I mean, has she been contacted? Has anyone tried to slow her down?" Another pause longer. "She mentioned that her editor received a call Wednesday evening from someone identifying themselves as a VSP communications liaison. The call suggested that the piece contained unverified claims and that publishing it could expose the paper to liability." "They tried to kill the story," Maya said. "They tried," Patricia said. "The Post legal team told the liaison that their documentation was thorough and their publication timeline was unchanged." Maya closed her eyes briefly. "Open them." "Good," she said. "Good." 9:30 a.m. Elena Cross was being discharged. Not home, not yet. The recovery from what her body had been through would take weeks. She was being transferred to a private cardiac rehabilitation unit on the 4th floor, where she would have her own space and proper monitoring, and crucially more freedom to move and think and talk than an ICU room allowed. Maya supervised the transfer personally. She walked beside the gurney and talked to Elena the whole way, the same way she talked to all her post-surgical patients during transitions, steady, matter-of-fact, keeping the patient's mind engaged so that the anxiety of moving didn't compound the physical stress. Elena asked questions about her recovery timeline. Maya answered them honestly. Elena listened carefully, the way she listened to everything with her full attention, and her particular habit of waiting until the other person had completely finished before she said a word. When they got Elena settled in the new room and the nursing team had done their checks and the door had closed to something approximating quiet, Elena looked at Maya and said, "Harold is coming at noon." "I know," Maya said. She had seen it in the calendar note Cross had added to Elena's chart, a small, deliberate thing that told her he was trying to do this right. "He wants to talk to both of us," Elena said, "about the testimony, about more than that." Elena paused. "He called me this morning before rounds. He was up all night. He said he'd been thinking about Foley." She looked at her hands for a moment. He said he's been thinking about Foley for a long time, and he always told himself it wasn't his problem to fix. Maya said nothing. She let Elena have the space to say what she was saying. He said he was wrong, Elena said quietly. Maya looked at her. People say that after the fact, she said carefully. The question is what they do with it. I know, Elena said. I told him the same thing. 11:17. Brennan's union filed a formal grievance challenging the administrative leave at 11 that morning. Patricia forwarded the filing to Maya with 3 words, expected, doesn't matter. But 20 minutes later, something arrived that Patricia had not expected. Maya was at the nurse's station reviewing charts when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. Something made her answer. Dr. Hartwell. The voice was male, middle-aged, careful. My name is Officer Terrence Webb. No relation to your attorney. I'm a 12-year veteran with the Virginia State Police currently assigned to the Richmond District. Maya straightened slightly. Officer Webb, and I want to be very clear that I'm calling on my own time from my personal phone and not in any official capacity, and he said. I also want to be clear that I've spoken to no one at my department about making this call. I understand, she said. Go ahead. A breath on the other end. I was in the dispatch center the night of your traffic stop. I heard Brennan's call to the hospital come through, and I want you to know that I flagged it. Internally, I filed a concern note with my supervisor at 12:04 a.m., less than 10 minutes after the call was made, because I believed it was outside protocol. He paused. That note was removed from the system by 6 a.m. Thursday morning. I have a screenshot. I took it because I expected exactly that to happen. The nurse's station seemed very far away. Maya turned and walked toward an empty corridor, keeping her voice completely even. Officer Webb, she said, I need to connect you with my attorney immediately. Are you willing to speak with her? Yes, he said. That's why I called. She'll protect your identity to the extent the law allows. She will advise you on whistleblower protection before you go any further. I know the risks, he said. I've thought about them for 2 days. A pause. I have a daughter, Dr. Hartwell. She's in nursing school. I keep thinking about her driving home from a late shift. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. I'm transferring you now, she said. 12:05 p.m. Cross arrived 5 minutes late, which was unusual enough that both Maya and Elena noticed. He came in looking like a man who had made a decision in the elevator and was still adjusting to its weight. He sat down across from Elena, looked at his wife for a long moment with something unguarded in his face, then turned to Maya. Foley resigned this morning, he said. The room went completely still. Resigned, Maya said. Submitted his letter at 10 a.m., effective immediately. No statement, no press. His assistant sent a one-line email to department heads. Cross looked at his hands. He knew the post piece was coming. Someone on Rachel Huang's editorial team had reached out for comment yesterday and he declined, which meant he knew the timeline. He ran, Elena said. He resigned, Cross said carefully. But his tone said the same thing. Maya thought about Foley's name on those 4 dismissal forms. She thought about Brennan's reprimand expunged 18 months ago. She thought about the bureaucratic architecture it took to make sure that 3 women's complaints went nowhere, and about what it meant that the person who had built that architecture had chosen to leave rather than face what was coming. That's the twist they didn't see coming, Patricia said when Maya called her 60 seconds after Cross delivered the news. Foley resigning before the piece runs actually accelerates the federal timeline because now there's no internal obstruction at the senior level. The DOJ investigators can move without worrying about Foley interfering with document access. And Brennan, Maya asked? Without Foley's protection, Brennan is exposed on all 3 prior complaints, plus yours. The union grievance doesn't change that. Federal jurisdiction supersedes the union agreement on civil rights violations. She paused. And we have Officer Webb's screenshot. Maya breathed. How solid is Webb? Solid, Patricia said. 12-year record commendations, no history of complaints. His whistleblower protection filing went in an hour ago. He is the inside witness we needed, Maya. This is the piece that makes the federal case airtight. For the first time since Tuesday night, Maya felt the ground under her feet feel solid. Not finished, nothing about this was finished, but solid. 2:30 p.m. The Washington Post piece posted online at 2:30 p.m., 12 hours ahead of its print run, because Rachel Huang's editor made the call that the story was ready, and the moment was now. Maya read it in the cardiac rehab lounge sitting next to Elena, both of them quiet as they scrolled through Rachel's 43 cases rendered in precise, devastating journalism. Names, dates, dispatch records, the signature patterns on dismissal forms, Foley's name appearing again and again in the administrative trail like a watermark on paper that was never meant to be held up to light. Brennan was named 14 times, each time with documentation. Elena finished reading before Maya did. She set her phone down and looked at the wall for a moment. 43 people, she said. At least 43, Maya said. How many of them are still waiting? The question landed with everything it carried. Maya didn't answer it because there was no clean answer. She thought about Denise driving home from night shifts in a car she no longer felt safe in. She thought about Yvonne sitting in a parking lot filing a report she already knew would go nowhere. She thought about the 38 other people in Rachel's files she had never met and might never meet, whose experiences had been recorded and dismissed and recorded again in a bureaucratic loop that was designed, whether intentionally or not, to exhaust the people inside it until they stopped. That's what comes next, Maya said. Finding them. 4 p.m. The idea had been forming since Wednesday morning, since Elena had looked at her in that recovery room and smiled and said good. But it became real at 4 o'clock Friday afternoon when Maya was sitting in Patricia's office with Elena, who had insisted on being brought over in a wheelchair IOPOL, and all because she said she was not having this conversation through a phone, and the three of them looked at each other over Patricia's conference table and said the thing out loud for the first time. A foundation, Maya said. Run a nonprofit that holds fundraisers and issues statements. A foundation with actual legal resources, staff attorneys, a hotline, a documentation system that doesn't depend on the people with power choosing to preserve the record. Advocacy and litigation, Patricia said immediately because she had been thinking about this too, had been thinking about it since the DOJ call, since Webb's screenshot, since the 43 names in Rachel's article. Paired, most of these victims don't need awareness. They need representation. And they need to know they're not alone, Elena said. She was sitting very straight in the wheelchair, more alert than she had any right to be for someone 4 days out of cardiac surgery. The thing Denise said that she wondered for 2 years if she'd imagined it. That's what isolation does. That's what the system is counting on. People suffering alone, each one thinking they're the only one. The Hartwell Initiative, Patricia said. Maya looked at her. It should have your name on it, Patricia said. Not because of ego, because your name is attached to what happened on that highway and what happened in that OR. And that story is the reason 43 people's files are on the front page of the Washington Post today, instead of buried in a database nobody checks. Your name means something now. Use it. Maya was quiet for a moment. She thought about her silver star in a shoebox under her bed. She thought about the way she had always been uncomfortable with her own visibility, had always preferred to be known by her work rather than her name, had chosen surgery in part because the best surgeons were invisible. You felt the outcome, not the person. But she thought about Denise, and she thought about the 43. Okay, she said. Elena reached across the table and put her hand over Maya's. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. 6:45 p.m. The federal charges against Dale Brennan were filed at 5:17 p.m. on Friday, 5 days after a black surgeon in scrub had pulled over on a Virginia highway with her badge already in her hand. The charges included civil rights violation under federal statute obstruction of emergency medical care and filing a false official report, the last count relating to his claim that she had failed to provide adequate documentation of her identity. Maya was back at the hospital when Patricia texted her the confirmation. She was standing in the hallway outside Elena's room, leaning against the wall with her arms folded in the particular posture of a person who has been moving at a dead sprint for 5 days and is only now allowing themselves to be still. James found her there. He read her face before he said a word the way good residents learn to read their attendings. It happened, he said. It happened, she said. He stood beside her for a moment without speaking. Then, what does it feel like? She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything, not the answer she was supposed to give, but the real one. Like mile 1 of a marathon, she said. Like I've been running hard enough to prove I can run, and now I can see how long the road actually is. James nodded slowly. Are you going to be okay? She looked at him. This young man she had trained, who had stood in OR3, with his hands in a patient's chest, waiting for her to arrive, who had sent her those 4 words at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had changed everything. She thought about the kind of people who became doctors, who chose this specific weight voluntarily and carried it their entire lives, not because it was easy, but because the alternative of someone not carrying it was unbearable. Yes, she said, I'm going to be okay. He nodded once more, and then he did something unexpected. He straightened up and said quietly, thank you for not stopping being who you are. Some people would have gone quiet after something like this. I'm glad you didn't. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, neither should you. Remember that. 3 weeks later, Elena Cross walked out of the cardiac rehabilitation unit on her own 2 feet. Harold Cross beside her and Maya waiting at the door. They stood there for a moment, the three of them, in the particular quiet that follows long storms. The Foundation's first board meeting is Tuesday, Elena said. I know, Maya said. I'll be there. Cross looked at Maya with the expression of a man who was still learning something about himself. Dr. Hartwell, he said, I want to say something to you directly, and I want you to hear it directly. She waited. I failed you on that highway, he said. Not just Brennan. The system I was part of failed you, and I was part of that system for 20 years without looking hard enough at what it was doing. He paused. I can't fix that, but I can stand in front of a federal hearing and say every word of what I know, and I intend to. Maya looked at him for a long time. Then stand, she said. She shook his hand. Then she turned to Elena, and Elena hugged her firmly, warmly, the way people hugged each other when they meant it and didn't care who saw. Same time next year, Elena said against her shoulder. Without the surgery part. Maya laughed, an actual laugh, the full kind, the kind that lived in the body and not just the throat. They walked out together into the cold November morning, and Maya stood on those hospital steps. The same steps where she had stood 5 days ago, with Patricia and microphones and 4 million watching eyes, and the city moved around her in its ordinary way, and she breathed it in, and she thought about Denise and Yvonne and Terrence Webb and Rachel Huang, and 43 names on a newspaper page, and the ones after them still waiting to be found. She had not started this. Dale Brennan had started this on a cold highway at midnight when he looked at a decorated surgeon with her badge already in her hand and decided she was no one. She intended to make sure that decision was the last mistake of its kind he ever made. And that was not a threat. It was not a promise. It was simply finally the truth spoken clearly without apology by a woman who had spent her entire life being exactly who she was in rooms that told her she shouldn't be there, and who had decided somewhere on the shoulder of that dark Virginia highway, with handcuffs on her wrists and a dying woman waiting on the other end of a ringing phone, that she was done being quiet about the cost of that. Maya Hartwell had always known how to save a life. Now she knew how to change one. And she was just getting started.